Hi, welcome to Tinfoil Handkerchief Alignment, and today I'm going to talk about imbalances within the sacral chakra that can impact our relationship to food. The sacral chakra is located just below the belly button, essentially in the area that would be referred to as muffin top. It also corresponds with our sense of taste. Appropriate, right? As far as sense of taste goes, I personally think there are a couple of ways to look at that. It can either be how we actually taste things as a bodily function, but it could also be in a material sense, in what we appreciate through outward displays, such as art, clothing style, or aesthetic. Also, in a material sense, it could represent our personal tastes in how we enjoy success or how we spend our money, or in emotional taste in what we value or find fulfilling in life, and personal preferences in interpersonal connections. I will say that although intimate orientation is an aspect of the sacral chakra, which can apply to but isn't limited to personal preference or taste in partners, I interpret it to be more about healthy desires and what we prioritize as individual, emotional, and intimate needs, in both a physical and spiritual sense. And to be clear, I don't interpret it to mean not being attracted to or loving who you want to love, nor does it mean not having any proclivities, fantasies, or some things that would be considered too taboo you'd worry what your church friends would think. It's more about having standards within relationships and how you define what intimacy means to you. Although the energetic center of the sacral chakra is carried within the muffin top, there are a number of other areas within the body that it helps to regulate. Our stomachs and digestive system helps us process food, which can also impact how we view our physical appearance and self-perception, which could be because the stomach is commonly perceived as a beauty standard, which could also apply to weight by association to the stomach. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just making the connection between stomach and self-perception. And that could very well be because I was never skinny and my stomach was often what I used as a guideline as far as how my appearance would be judged. As I healed aspects within self and as I learned to balance my chakras, though, I don't put so much emphasis on that as it pertains to how I judge my standard of physical beauty. And it doesn't impact my perception of self and my confidence the way it once did. When I allowed that to impact my confidence, self-esteem, and was basing how I perceived myself on how attractive potential partners thought or didn't think I was, I had a much unhealthier relationship with food. When I was in my late teens and through most of my 20s, I went through some stressful years and developed some gastrointestinal issues like IBS, which impacted my digestion, what I could eat, and my weight. Although I had always been bigger, in my 20s, I was going through significant weight fluctuations seemingly every 2 years for about 10 years. I wasn't sure if I just had a slow metabolism because I was pretty physically active at the time and wasn't sure why I seemed to be unable to lose weight. Dysfunction with metabolism usually impacts how we process food and can cause weight fluctuations. As I mentioned, stomach and weight are often associated with perception of self, at least for me. It's interesting to note that the thyroid is actually part of the throat chakra. It helps regulate heart rate and even body temperature. The hormones it produces also help regulate metabolism and energy levels. So while relationship with food is associated with the sacral chakra, I think this is another great example of how impact to energetic flow in one chakra can cause symptoms or a disruption in others. The bigger I was, the worse I viewed myself, which is an aspect that corresponds to imbalance within the solar plexus. At times, I almost felt guilty and shameful about eating. Now, I'm not saying this works for everyone, but in the last few years, I learned about intermittent fasting and started to incorporate that. It really helped me a lot with reestablishing and recalibrating my relationship to food, but also it worked within my schedule as I was working 2 jobs and a lot of shift work and found it difficult to stick to a routine when it came to making meals. As I developed gastro issues, it impacted my ability to eat. In addition to the guilt and shame I already felt for eating while I was perceived to be bigger than most girls, I started to have to consider things like how close the nearest bathroom was, how many times I'd need to go, and how far I could be away from it when I inevitably got sick after I ate, which sometimes could be within 15 minutes, sometimes it could be a couple hours later. I just never really knew, and sometimes it just depended on the food. Having gone through that for a couple years, I started to associate food with hassle, pain, and in some instances, embarrassment, which further impacted my already dysfunctional relationships with food, my own self-esteem, self-perception, and confidence. For the most part, I stopped eating in restaurants or public places, mostly because I could never be sure how long after I ate I'd have until I got sick, how many times I'd have to stop on the way home to go to the bathroom, and how many hours that would last. So I'd usually just wait until I got home to be near my own bathroom, where I could at least be more comfortable between bathroom trips and didn't have to worry about being stuck somewhere for hours not being able to be productive. Also, at least I'd have 2-ply toilet paper. For that reason, I usually wouldn't eat during the workday unless it was a snack. This is another reason why intermittent fasting works for me personally. I was pretty much doing it already. Between the gastro issues and the stress, there was also a point where I lost so much weight, I looked unhealthy. But because I had been called fat for so much of my life, I appreciated the comments about how much weight I lost. At the time, I got really caught up in it because it felt like people could finally see more of me for who I am, rather than focus on my weight or how I could look better. Eventually, the reality hit me that I felt like I was only getting attention based on physical appearance that I wasn't getting prior to me losing weight. It also felt a lot more like people cared less about my health than my appearance. I had lost as much weight as I did because I was extremely stressed, but no one seemed to care about or consider that I wasn't actually doing well at the time. But because I had never gotten the type of attention before as I was at the time, and I was enjoying the newfound compliments, looks, and attention that I was getting, I then found myself sort of using my gastro issues to avoid food more, even at times I didn't really need to. I developed a fear of putting the weight back on, since I always seemed to gain weight much quicker than I could lose it, which was part of my struggle for years prior to developing gastro issues. I wasn't actively trying to lose weight or watch what I ate. It's just that when I'm stressed, I struggle to eat at all, let alone keep food down when I do. And that's not because I'm trying not to let it digest. It's more like my body feels like it's outright rejecting it. With that said, I used to eat a lot unhealthier too, which in retrospect was a large contributor to why I struggled to lose weight, even with being active or working out. It just wasn't something I really considered at the time because I had a pretty active lifestyle, and I was thinking of it in terms of calories. Like my active lifestyle should have been enough to counteract the calories that I was eating. I've always felt stress in my stomach the most, so the more stressed out I became, the more it exacerbated my gastro issues as well. I did eventually learn to manage my gastro issues and slowly started to overcome my aversion to food, but it took a long time. Actually, one of the main reasons I personally seen so much value in learning to balance my own emotions, because it alleviates some of the impact of stress on my stomach. And I talk so much about how important it is to find emotional balance because it took me years to learn, but changed my life in multiple ways when I did. It wasn't until my early 30s when I started working on my own healing that I realized I was just so excited about feeling like I was finally getting external validation from others that I had been overlooking how unhealthy I had become, particularly when it came to my relationship with food, mostly as it pertained to my perception of self based on my weight. The compliments I was getting when I first lost a significant amount of weight helped me feel more confident and less stressed, which slowly and eventually helped me regain my appetite. But when I regained my appetite, I had two modes: feeling apprehensive about eating because I didn't want to put the weight back on, and whether or not I would have a flare within my gastro issues, and eating so much I'd get sicker than just my usual gastro issue experiences. I think a lot of that was more because my body had adjusted to eating less, but when I was hungry, I was hungry. Then I would way overdo it because I was so excited to have an appetite enough to eat again. Though it wasn't intentional on my part, when I look back at it, for a while it would have started looking closer to an eating disorder and less like trying to get healthy again. But I was in a little bit of denial about it at the time. Some of that too was that my body kind of felt traumatized from getting sick when I ate for an extended period of time. It's taken me a really long time to get to a more balanced place with that, and sometimes it's still a struggle. But I'm in a healthier place with it now than I used to be. And the part that kind of hurts in retrospect is that so many people were so focused on complimenting my weight loss and telling me I looked great that they didn't even seem to notice that it was a result of ill health. But when I realized I was being unhealthy, it was something I corrected on my own and didn't want or need the validation from anyone else about it. People not having recognized that it was even a thing almost helped me in that respect. Not because it was a good thing, but for me, it took out some of the shame of it when I recognized it for myself. So it was something I was able to work through and begin healing on my own without the extra pressure that would have come from the scrutiny and the second guessing that I could ever even heal or improve my mental state. All that aside, it really comes down to I was less confident in myself, both in terms of self-expression and being my authentic self. When I let other people's thoughts on my appearance impact how I felt about me. When the thing I should have been focusing on was getting healthier for myself rather than to be more attractive and more understood by others. I say it like that because I felt more misunderstood and like people couldn't really hear me when I felt fat. But because I had low self-worth based on my weight, I had less confidence and was more negatively attuned in a lot of ways. I was more willing to compromise my values and integrity or say things just to be liked rather than being truthful or speaking with integrity. I've always been a bigger girl and was usually the fat one in any group of friends I had. And for the most part, I was also significantly taller than a lot of my other friends too. So I was often overlooked or blatantly ignored in favor of more petite girls. Not even just when it came to dating, in other interpersonal relationships as well. There were a lot of people who never made the effort to get to know me because they didn't find me attractive, which usually seemed to correspond with my weight. It was a big part of why I felt undesirable and had a significant impact on my self-esteem and confidence level. So when people did seem more inclined to talk to or listen to me, my emphasis was more on wanting to be liked so they'd stick around rather than being my authentic self. So although an unhealthy relationship to food and gastro issues are indicators of imbalances within the sacral chakra, they had a significant impact on my other chakras as well, particularly my solar plexus and throat. The fear of fleeting connections caused overall emotional insecurity within myself, which can also be indicative of a root chakra imbalance as well, which in turn meant I was more inclined to be drawn to or stay in unhealthier relationship situations or interpersonal connections, which would be indicators of imbalance within the heart chakra. And because of that, I didn't have a good perception of myself, and my perception of how good the intentions of others were clouded, which are indicators of imbalances within the third eye. So I didn't really have a clear understanding of my value as an individual outside of my physical appearance, and I had a harder time understanding situations for what they were, which would be indicators of an imbalance within the crown chakra. See how it all connects? In reality, it was a lot of factors, and my weight wasn't as much of a factor as I perceived it to be. It wasn't always something that I could control as much as others thought that I could. And realistically, if a potential partner was going to change how much they loved me based on a 20-pound weight fluctuation, then they probably don't really love me for me as much as what I look like, which is a whole different issue. So why would I care what guys like that think of me anyways, if that's not the kind of relationship I'm looking for? Even with friends, if friends are based on who's the most attractive to have in your friend group, then they're not real friends. I later found that as I found confidence within myself, I felt a lot more balanced in other areas within my chakra system. I came to prioritize healthy relationships over just having people around and focusing on my own health rather than other people's perception of me based on my physical appearance. Now, I do want to be clear that being confident in yourself doesn't mean taking pride in toxic traits or things that are unhealthy. I say that because as great as it is that body positivity is being more encouraged over the last few years, there are a lot of people who seem to rely on that to excuse certain traits or behaviors. Whereas I interpret body positivity more as embracing flaws and learning to love yourself enough to believe that you can heal or work on areas of your life that maybe are more negatively attuned, unhealthy, or toxic. And I don't mean to sound old, but when I was growing up, there were a lot of clothes you couldn't buy or stores you couldn't shop at if you were above like a size 4. Now, that may be a bit of an exaggeration, maybe a 10, but still. That's not even average. So in that regard, it was almost like being unhealthy was being promoted and there was a certain level of exclusion if you weren't below average when it came to weight, which resulted in a lot of people aspiring to be unhealthy just because they wanted cute clothes. So my interpretation of embracing body positivity was to be more inclusive of healthy, natural, fuller, or curvy baselines for weight. And I'm not saying that to be exclusionary, because there are people who have issues that make it difficult to gain or lose weight, usually metabolism or glandular issues. I just think body positivity became a thing so more people didn't feel bad about themselves for being a normal, healthy weight. I just don't personally interpret it as an excuse not to take care of yourself to the point of obesity or being super sickly skinny either, or not aspiring to make changes or healthier lifestyle choices. I also don't take it as forcing others to find your lifestyle choices attractive if you're being unhealthy. I think the point is, if you're confident in yourself, you don't put that much emphasis on your external appearance or lifestyle choices being validated by others. If you do, that would indicate that there is still a level of insecurity within self. Like I've said before, I've come to believe that many of us don't love or trust ourselves authentically or unconditionally enough to believe that someone else will. This was definitely true for me, and most noticeable when I didn't feel confident in myself or relied on others for validation on how attractive or physically presentable I was. If you don't truly love yourself, how is someone else supposed to truly love you? With that said, another important thing to consider is not everyone has the same perception or standard of what health or beauty means to them. And the same things don't work for everyone in terms of becoming a healthier, happier version of yourself either. For example, the same diets and workouts don't have the same results for everyone. Confidence is also about being able to understand and interpret your body's individual needs and taking time to go at your own pace without trying to compete with a standard or someone else. It's about finding what makes you feel healthy and happy in a way that's authentic to you. When I became more confident and emotionally balanced, I became less stressed, which helped alleviate some of my gastro issues and restored some of my appetite, which in turn helped me reestablish a healthier relationship with food. That's not to say my gastro issues went away entirely, because they didn't, but there was a significant improvement overall. When I was able to reestablish a healthier relationship to food, I also found myself wanting to eat healthier, less processed food. That doesn't mean I don't like candy or that I never have anything processed. It also doesn't mean that I eat everything organic. It just means that I was making healthier choices and was more inclined to make food at home, not getting fast food 8 times a week, which was my average for a long time. And I justified it because I worked a lot of double shifts where I didn't have a lot of time in between. And just by making that adjustment, I was actually able to lose weight much more naturally, and it was easier to keep off. I felt internally healthier, more full, and not so lethargic. My mood improved, my weight improved, my gut health improved, my perception of self improved, and in turn, my confidence improved. Other sacral chakra related components of the physical body are bladder, gallbladder, kidneys, liver, pancreas, spleen, and upper intestines, and they all have some sort of filtration component, as well as help with regulation and metabolization of different things that each one is responsible for. Skin is also a physical component of the sacral chakra, which, as it pertains to relationship with food, makes sense that there are a lot of instances where the body's inability to break down food can result in skin conditions or irritations. Though food allergies or processing issues can look a lot different depending on the person, there are a lot of instances where physical indicators of imbalance present themselves on the skin. For example, some people allergic to gluten may get rashes or hives. Allergies to citrus can cause outbreaks or dry skin. Peanut allergies can cause swelling. And though not always true, it's been long assumed that too much sugar can cause acne. But all of that essentially goes back to how the body metabolizes different ingredients. My personal opinion, and just as a reminder, I'm not a medical professional, these are just my personal interpretations of how it all connects, is that when one of the filtration components of the body, such as the liver or intestines, struggle to process certain ingredients, the body tries to excrete it in other ways, such as through the skin. But since the skin is more of a filter for external irritants, whereas the other sacral chakra associated organs are more about filtering and metabolizing internally, I think it makes sense that it would cause surface level irritation. But I would interpret that to be an indicator of an internal dysfunction in a different, yet still likely sacral associated area of the body, if that makes sense. Just hypothesizing here. My interpretation would be that for the most part, it would be associated with the 3 lower chakras of the solar plexus, sacral, and root, as they deal most with digestion, filtration, and excretion. Though not always true. But again, most of the physical components of the sacral chakra have a filtration component, particularly when it comes to processing food and metabolizing it. I actually think that skin conditions are an important overall indicator to energetic health because they're more physically visible than a lot of other symptoms of imbalance that would also be considered physical. I consider them to be early warning signs of a larger energetic imbalance. But that's also another example of how dysfunction in one chakra can impact the flow of energy to others. And that's actually pretty literal when it comes to how our bodies process food, because metabolization converts food to the energy our bodies use to function. So different bodily functions can be impacted based on how we process food and can cause a bunch of physical or health-related issues in any chakra or associated physical component. Those with skin problems or allergies often struggle with confidence, self-perception, even self-expression because of how those issues can physically present themselves, which can often look like a variety of things and can have different levels of meaning for different people that it impacts. Reproductive organs are also a component of the sacral chakra. In terms of relationship to food, particularly when it comes to women, there may be impact to menstruation and menstrual flow, particularly with significant weight loss or gain, which can also have an impact on regularity, which in turn can also impact fertility. The sacral chakra is also associated with the color orange. I'm not super familiar with color therapy, but it's said that the color orange can help provide a supplementary level of relief for things like arthritis, depression, colds, gastro issues, fatigue, kidney and liver disease, or stiffness, many of which are physical ailments associated with or exacerbated by imbalances within the sacral chakra. 4 tools to recalibrate, rebalance, and restore a healthy flow of energy within your sacral chakra. You can use the mantras of VAM and as well as D notes. For scents, I normally use sandalwood, but you can also use rose or jasmine. For crystals, it usually depends on the use or function you're looking for whatever you're trying to recalibrate. For overall sacral health, I personally use crystals like carnelian or sunstone. You can also use different stones for balancing different aspects within the sacral chakra. Carnelian is good for balancing the sacral chakra overall, as it's thought to help improve aspects predominantly associated with the sacral in terms of creativity and intimate vitality, though could help stimulate flow within the lower 3 chakras as well. Carnelian is also thought to be helpful in assisting with digestion and boosting metabolism, including how our bodies absorb nutrients, and helps increase overall energy levels. Sunstone is associated more with the sacral in terms of improving intimate health, thought to alleviate fear and depression, decreases negative thoughts and stress. It's also thought to increase willpower and confidence, as well as empower authenticity. Citrine is more associated with the solar plexus, but is thought to assist with and stimulate digestion and decrease symptoms of imbalanced gut health like bloating. Topaz is thought to help with sacral aspects such as weight loss and skin issues, or in a more general sense, improve health and assist with healing wounds. Tiger's eye is more for the solar plexus or root, but the sacral chakra is situated between them. It's thought to help alleviate stress and depression, increase self-esteem, and protect against negative energy that would allow for healing within the sacral chakra as well. There are different types of moonstone, and for the most part, they're associated with stress relief and are thought to help soothe and balance emotions. For women, it's also thought to assist with and improve menstruation and fertility. As previously mentioned, with color, sound, crystals, and scents, strength and vibrancy can influence impact. Attuning to yourself will allow you to be able to better determine how much or how little of each tool you need to rebalance within. Eventually, you'll also determine which you find the most helpful, especially if there are certain traits or aspects you're naturally more predisposed to. So I hope you've enjoyed my interpretation about our relationship with food as it pertains to being an aspect of the sacral chakra, and how finding balance within it can restore a healthy flow to our other chakras, as well as overall confidence and self-perception. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to the channel. If you're interested in booking any energy healing services or tarot and oracle readings, check out my Etsy shop. Or check out my other YouTube channel, Tinfoil Handkerchief Tarot, for general collective readings. Until next time, keep the peace.